Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have 3 questions I'm going to go over. But first, before I go into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. So that'd be helpful. And again, I appreciate everybody that listens to the podcast. Next, I have my one-on-one online coaching service. And with that, if you're sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. There's also at least 1 to 2 bottlenecks outside of the training that we find out that are keeping you from seeing the results you want to see. If you're not interested in doing like full one-on-one coaching, I do have one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and/or map out a game plan for the next couple months. Or if you want something that, again, doesn't cost anything, you can learn more about if you want to learn more about body recomp, I have my 75-minute masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it, and you can find the link to that in the show notes. And then lastly, the link for all of that is going to be in the show notes as well. And then lastly, if you like my content and you don't follow me on Instagram, follow me there, Jeff, HOEHN_, and that's where I'm most active. And if you have any questions, you can reach out there. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So my first question is, why can't I get a pump even after 6 sets, 3 each leg, 20 reps of Bulgarian split squats with no rest? Why am I not getting a pump? So first, what is a pump? I think for people that have been training for a while, this is like intuitive, but a lot of people I don't really know what the pump is. So that pump is like basically that feeling where your muscles feel super full. They look bigger. You get a lot of blood flow to there, right? And they just get that really like full feeling to them, almost like they're going to pop in a way. So that's the pump. So I think my first thing here with this is the pump isn't everything. So don't be like trying to chase a pump. You're not, just because you're getting a pump doesn't necessarily mean that you are building muscle. Now, it could be a good sign, right? These are one of the indicators that we look for. Hey, if you're getting a pump, it's probably a good sign, like things are going on, right? You're probably good from like a nutrition standpoint. Sleep's probably on point. So a pump is one indicator, but it's not everything. And you shouldn't be chasing a pump if you're trying to build muscle, right? Like you can chase a pump, but that's not going to be everything, right? I used to make this mistake with my training where I always would try to go for the pump, and that was the biggest thing. And it can be addicting, right? Like you look bigger and whatnot, but my results weren't as great as they could have been because I was chasing the pump, right? I wasn't using progressive overload. I was just chasing that. And again, if that's what you're doing, you're not progressively overloading, then you're going to be leaving some results on the table. So I think that's the very first thing here is don't just try to chase a pump. Don't try to do this crazy protocol where you're doing 20 reps with no rest just to get a pump, right? Because that's not going to be great for building muscle. Like at that point, what you're doing is a lot of work, very submaximal work that's not going to be close enough to muscular failure for you to actually build muscle at that point, right? So I think that's the first thing here with this. If you are doing that is don't chase the pump. And especially if you're just like going no rest and that's the main goal. But a few things here, if you aren't ever getting a pump and you would maybe like to experience one, what are some things that you can look at? So I think first, look at your nutrition. Are you in a deficit? Fewer calories and carbohydrates overall can make getting a pump tough, right? So if you don't have a lot of glycogen storage, right? If your glycogen storage is low, and that usually is when carbohydrates are low, you're doing a lot of exercise, you're in a calorie deficit. If that's the case, it's going to be tougher to get a pump. Okay. So this is where if you're fat loss dieting, it's going to be a lot tougher to get a pump there. Anytime I go to a mini cut or transition to a cut, it's like, I don't get a pump for a while, like maybe, and even at the end of it too, right? There might be some times where if you do like a refeed where you have a day that's maybe a day or two before training, you might get a little bit more of a pump. But overall, if you're in a deficit, like that pump is going to go down. But then the moment like the cut's over and I go back to building or maintenance and I have more food in, it's like literally I could touch a weight and I'm pumped already. The nutrition's going to be a big thing here, right? But also on that nutrition, what's your hydration like? Not having the proper amounts of water and sodium could affect it as well too. Maybe you are eating enough calories, but now maybe you haven't had much sodium lately. And then on top of it, maybe you're not very hydrated. That's going to affect the pump as well too. So look at that. Look at your hydration around training. One of my favorite like pre-workouts is stem-free pre-workout. It's got some stuff in there to help with blood flow, which can help with the pump, but then also making sure I'm hydrated and then getting some sodium in, right? Putting some salt in there can be helpful. So looking at that, seeing what your hydration is. And again, not just water, but also sodium as well too. So we want to make sure that's in a good spot. So look at that around your workouts, and that can be something that helps you get a pump. how are you performing the exercise? You might not be doing it in a way that hits the muscle group you want. So for example, Bulgarian split squats, you could be doing it in a way that's more glute focused. So that's where the pump's going to be, right? And maybe it's tougher to feel the pump in your glutes than it is in like your quads or something like that. So see how you're performing the exercise. That could be a big reason why you're not seeing a pump in the muscle group that you want. And then also just doing too much volume. So too much volume can decrease your pump, especially if recovery isn't on point. So again, you go into it, hey, you're in a deficit, you're doing a ton of training volume, you're not sleeping well. It's going to be really hard to get a pump there at that point. And I'm sure you guys have all been there too with training. I remember when I used to do higher volume stuff, it was like there was a point where the pump was good. And then all of a sudden, either I took a long break or like I was talking to somebody or something came up or I just did a lot of volume for that muscle group. Eventually that pump goes away and that's tougher to get again. So too much training volume, doing too much can also alter it as well. Keep that in mind. If you're somebody that chases volume and you like to do a lot of training volume, you might just be doing a little bit too much. And then again, recovery is not on point. So this is why I say like the pump can be a decent indicator, because if sleep's on point, nutrition's on point, you're recovering from training, it's like the pump should be easier to get. Whereas again, if sleep's off, don't have enough nutrition or enough calories, and you're also doing a ton of volume, not recovering from it, it's going to be a lot harder to get a pump. So I think the summary here is, first, remember, don't chase the pump. The pump isn't everything. It's just one indicator, but it's not everything. Just because you aren't getting a pump doesn't mean you are not building muscle, right? So I just wouldn't chase it for that sake. The only time you would ever want to chase a pump just to get a pump is if you are like doing a bodybuilding competition or like a photo shoot. That would be the only time you would probably want to do more pump work, but you're also not building muscle when you're doing that at that point. So again, don't put all your stock into the pump. And also just remember, some exercises in some muscle groups might be a little bit tougher to get a pump in. Okay. Maybe for you, it's like really hard to get one in your back, but then biceps, it's easy. Maybe for your triceps, it's easier. Maybe. So I think it also depends. It's group dependent. I find that legs are a little bit tougher to get a pump in there. Just keep that in mind as well too. So hopefully that was helpful there on that. All right. So next question is, what percentage of body fat versus percentage of muscle can I expect to gain in a lean build? So it's kind of the concept of P ratio. So out of X amount of weight that you gain, say it's a pound, how much of that is going to be muscle versus fat? And it's really hard to say. It's dependent on just so many things, right? So a few things, for example, how much muscle you already have. The more muscle you have, you can expect that for every pound you gain, compared to somebody who has less muscle and has been training less than you, you could expect that you're going to build less muscle than them per pound. Genetics, that's going to play a big role. Somebody that has great genetics, for every pound they gain, they're probably going to be able to build a little bit more muscle. Now, I am going to talk about this, but obviously your methods about going about that weight gain is also going to be important. Drugs too, right? If you're somebody that's on special sports supplement, for every pound you gain, more of it's probably going to be muscle than it is fat. So these are things that you need to realize, that this is a hard thing to say for sure, because it's really going to depend on the person, right? It could be close to a pound of muscle versus where somebody who's more advanced, maybe it's a quarter muscle, right? So it just really depends. So my thought on this is that you just need to make sure you're putting yourself in the best position to make sure more of the weight you gain is muscle versus fat, rather than paying attention to the exact percentage. Like, just put the inputs in and rely on these principles, and you should be good to go. That's going to be better than you stressing over what's my percentage going to be, because we don't really know, and there's no point in worrying about that. I think with anything fitness, but especially building muscle, just people focus on like the details, and they lose track of the big principles, right? Hey, you need to push yourself in training. You need to train consistently, get plenty of protein. Just make sure your weight's not like trending down. Like, those are the big things. Get enough sleep, but it's always, what's the optimal rate of gain to maximize muscle versus fat? And that's a fine question, but are those principles in place first before you are worried about that, right? Or how much volume do I need to do? Or are you progressing in your training? Like, training has to be there. Focus on these inputs versus, how much muscle can I expect to gain in this amount of time? And so focus on what you can focus on and what you can control, right? So here are things that are going to make sure more of the weight you gain is muscle. A smaller calorie surplus, right? Think no more than like 0.5% of body weight gain per week. And we probably want to zoom out to a month time scale on that, right? Just because when there's some water weight fluctuations going on. So over the month, are you gaining about 2% of your body weight per month, right? Look at those longer time scales on that. But a smaller calorie surplus, right? The quicker you gain weight, the more of that weight is going to come in the form of body fat, right? You can't really speed up muscle growth once you have the basics out of the way. You got enough protein, you're getting sleep, you're training hard. If you try to gain quicker, you're just going to add more body fat. You can't speed that process up. Whereas like when you drop, you can lose weight by just being in like a larger calorie deficit, right? Again, maybe that's not great from a body composition standpoint, but you can lose weight quicker. And again, you can gain weight quicker, but it's going to be more muscle than, or more body fat than muscle. So we want to make sure that the surplus is controlled. I've been there. I've done those building phases, and surplus is where it was, oh, I just need to gain weight. Doesn't matter. And I put on way more body fat than I needed to at that point. Right. So I think that's the big thing, is you have to make sure that you're not going super quick with it. So again, depending on where you're at, you could maybe be closer to your maintenance. If you're more advanced, maybe you have to be in a surplus, but we want that surplus to be on the lower end. We don't want to have that massive surplus. We want to have protein around 1 gram per pound of body weight. So again, making sure you're getting in plenty of protein. You could be in a small calorie surplus training hard, but then if your protein is really low, you're going to be missing out on some muscle growth. And you might find that a little bit more of that weight that you're gaining is going to be more, it's going to start to push more towards body fat versus muscle. Lift weights and progress in those lifts over time. So again, we could have perfect protein, we could have a small calorie deficit, but if we're not weight training, we're not pushing that weight training and progressing over time, more of that weight that you gain is going to be body fat versus muscle. Get enough sleep. Again, you could be gaining some weight, protein's good, but if you're not sleeping well, it's going to be, your body's going to, more of that weight that you gain is going to go towards fat gain, right? So do these 4 things, stay consistent and be patient, right? That's the biggest thing that you can do. I do think that it's going to be tough to ever have it be, if you gain 1 pound, it's all muscle, right? That's going to be very tough. There's probably unique circumstances with that where you're new to training, you have all these nailed down. You could probably have this period of time where you can maximize that and whatnot. Also, one other thing here too that's going to play a role in this that I didn't think about. Obviously, the leaner you are, like if you're like 10% body fat, you're going to have like more of it's going to, your body's going to prefer the weight that it gains. Some of that is going to be fat gain as well too, right? So the leaner you are, there is going to be a little bit more body fat gain. Again, that doesn't mean don't get lean. It just says, hey, you have to understand that like when you get super low in body fat, your body is going to store body fat on the way back up, right? Because it does need that. Now, again, we can control this by doing these things that I talked about, but that is going to alter it as well too. Like I said, the best thing you can do is control for these things, stay consistent, and just be patient. You can't speed up muscle growth. It's just anybody that has a good physique has done it for a long period of time. And that's really the biggest key here. Obviously, again, we can make things go quicker and we can make things more optimal by doing these things. But at the end of the day, like the fundamental thing here is you have to be patient. All right. So last question is PPL split versus full body for muscle growth. So I took this as, hey, what's better for muscle growth? And when it comes to muscle growth, one isn't going to be better than the other. Okay. I think with any split, I think it can give you a good foundation, right? It gives you a good foundation to work with and to progress. So that's where I think the benefit of following splits can help, right? But the big thing is you need to stick with whatever split you do to see what works and what doesn't work, right? Maybe you try a couple different ones. Hey, maybe I like doing a little bit higher frequency. I like doing a little bit lower frequency. I like working the same muscle group. I like working different muscle groups in a workout. See what works and stick with it for at least like 6 to 12 weeks and see what you like. Pick out certain things that you enjoy from each one, while also you're doing this, figuring out what muscle groups are responsive to training, which ones get sore, which ones take longer to recover. I think if you do that for a year or two, you follow certain splits, you stick with each one that you do for an extended period of time, again, at least 6 to 12 weeks, and you take notes on this stuff, then you can start to individualize your training here. Because I think what is more important is finding a setup that allows you to push your training, but also recover, and one that you enjoy. So here's like my rules of thumb for muscle growth, right? 6 to 15 sets per muscle group per week. 80 to 90% of your training is in the 6 to 15 rep range. Try to hit each muscle group 2 times per week. And then how you break that up is up to you. It can be push, pull legs, it can be full body, et cetera. So I think, again, following principles is the key thing here. And each kind of program is going to do that, right? So push, pull legs, again, you could do that once a week, where you do each one once a week. You could do it twice a week. You're obviously going to get a little bit more training volume. Again, you get more training volume, then your intensity is going to have to go down a little bit. You have to make sure you can recover, right? You're going to get a little bit more frequency for each muscle group. You do full body. It's okay. Now you're training each muscle group. Do you like that? The frequency can be a little bit different, right? I think following these, like the exact splits aren't important so long as you hit the principles, you're pushing your training, and then from there you can find what works best for you and you can start to individualize it. So I just wanted to go over this because I think, again, people put too much stock into, oh, what training program are you on? And that's not super important. It's just, again, can you get about 6 to 15 sets per muscle group per week? It was 80 to 90% of your training in the 6 to 15 rep range. And are you hitting each muscle group about twice a week, right? If you hit those, it's however you split that up is ultimately up to you and what you enjoy best there. And again, what your muscle groups can recover from. Like I said, try different splits, stick with each one for at least 6 to 12 weeks, see which ones you like, see which ones are most fun, which ones you respond to best, and then take the principles from those. And then you can start to make your own program. Because for example, with my program now with Brian, as I'm pulling this up, it's what's your training split? It's really hard to say because for one, we're doing a specialization phase for my delts and upper back. So that's going to change things a little bit. But for example, let me pull this up real quick. So day one is full upper delt back focus, right? So I'm doing some lat stuff. I'm doing like upper delt or front delt, upper chest stuff, pull-ups. Then he's got a little bit of arms thrown in at the end there to get a little bit extra arm volume. Then the next day it's lower plus core. So I'm doing some lower stuff, RDLs, leg extensions, pendulum squats, ab work, right? And then the next day it's delts and back. So now I'm doing more delt work, more upper back stuff. And this is all back, right? And then 2 days later, we're hitting upper chest and arms. So I'm doing like chest work, and then I'm doing triceps and bicep stuff. And then the last day it's lower plus delts and back, right? So this is a good day to get seated leg curls in, a good day to get some split squats in, but some rows, some lateral raises, right? So basically it's all about, can you hit, like, you have your week out, your how many days you can train, and then from there you can start to divvy it up to see how you can fit everything in there. But I think initially you do need to get a good baseline, and that's where following a structured program like a push-pull legs or full body can be helpful. And then again, you make those adjustments over time. So hopefully that was helpful in helping you figure out what do I need to do for my training program, or is this program better than another one? That's it for now, guys. And I will chat with you next week.